Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay. Sorry, I'm late. I went on the wrong meeting.
Mm.
I went on your meeting, Zara, for some reason. I don't know why.
Hello everyone.
Hey, so Narsimha and Kartik are going to be a little bit late. They're finishing up another meeting.
Okay. Um, just before that, I'm not sure if it will be useful. So can you enable me for a screen share?
Yeah. Yeah, this is actually a good time for us to share the things that you're thinking about.
Yeah.
This is like our second overlap meeting.
Yeah.
Whoa, okay, woo.
So basically, Tammy, what I did is that Karthik has provided us this CSV file of the correlation matrix. What are some of the variables significant
Yeah.
enough? So I basically sliced them, and this is the equipment type. And in the ACS Fusion data, and these are the variables for each of these different types of heating system.
Okay, I'm looking equipment variable. Can you make it a little bit bigger? It's really
Sorry.
hard to see this.
Let's say, for example, if the equipment type is built-in electric, the variables that are significant enough associated with that installation type is building type, fuel type, race, Latino, some climate variables, and mostly the vintage year, something like that.
Okay. So
So
I don't like the way the vintage year is done. Right. I this is a super weird way of doing it.
yeah, yeah,
It's
uh,
not your fault. It's how it is in the data
sometimes,
set.
yeah. But the idea was that, like, okay, it is very difficult to go through the data set and try to find out which one is
For
significant
sure.
enough. So I just,
I know you don't have another option.
yeah,
So I'm not saying that
yeah,
you should have done something different. I'm saying I don't like the way the
yeah,
data is set up for this particular question, the vintage year.
yeah.
Okay, can we look? So are all of the things you listed here, the black, the blue, the purple, the green, and the red, are those all the things that are significant
Yes, for this type of heating system.
for that type of heating systems? What is the BLD boat?
I think is the building type, or like whether it is RV, whether it is van.
Okay, but
I
that's not a building type.
I
Is
just
it?
I believe uh,
let me.
that's their car and the probable use of electricity for their car. Oh,
Yeah, it doesn't make any. What is this? So I don't understand what your things are over on the left. Built-in electric units. No, tell me what these are. Let's not speculate because this does not make any sense to me.
Okay, let me pull the data set. This is Fusion data set. Mhm.
And Rydell, did you get these off Kartik's heat maps or Where did
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Okay. And his heat maps he had for all the United States, not just Colorado, right? But then
Yeah,
he later sent Colorado.
yes. But that does not have correlation matrix, or was that?
It doesn't have, sorry, what?
Did it have correlation matrix, the second file Karthik
I'm sorry, I
provided?
didn't understand your word. Can you just repeat it slowly?
Yeah, so like when Karthik provided the Colorado specific data set, did it include correlation matrix, or I thought this is the only?
Oh, yeah, I didn't look. I didn't look.
Yeah, anyway, I'll look it up. So this is
So
the,
you looked at the correlation matrix and not at the heat map. Is that
no,
right?
no. So the heat map is produced based on the correlation matrix.
Yeah.
So I played with the actual value to identify, so transform that visualization into a list of variables, something like that.
Oh, but I think you're saying you didn't use the heat map, which is, it's more sensible because then you can look at the actual values, right?
But the heat map is produced based on this data.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
What are these values? Is this the correlation matrix?
Yeah, Karthik mentioned it. So correlation. I think
Yeah,
this is,
so I just want a direct answer.
yeah,
Yes, it is the correlation matrix for all those data.
yes.
Okay.
And uh, so this is the dictionary. Ah, so these are different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I understand these. Is this where the boats came from?
Oh, no. So this is the equipment type given in the SS Fusion data.
Okay. And that's what you're breaking these down
Yes.
by?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and go back to that page. So built-in electric units would have been one of the things in the list that you were showing, right?
Yes.
So then you screen for that equipment type and to see what is correlated with that or what?
Yes.
Okay, I think actually some context at the beginning of the file would be super helpful.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so having done this, can you explain what the boat and the RV and the van
Yeah.
is?
Yeah. I understand. I'm not super efficient with all the variables. So, um, mhm.
So can you just give a physical explanation of what it is rather than have us look around the data? Can you just talk it out?
Yeah, I just, so I have to look it up, but like for other examples, the use of fuel type, as for like using coal or solar energy in an household, is associated with this type of heating system installation.
Okay, but it's hard for me to understand how coal or coke can be associated with an electric unit.
I don't know. I'm just presenting the association or the variables close
Okay.
with it. Yeah.
Okay, I understand you're presenting it, but I think that your presentation gives us a good platform to
Yeah.
discuss. Right, like you gathered all this information by looking deeply at the data, and now we can discuss it, but we're not just gonna go with correlations because sometimes they don't make sense.
Yeah.
Correlations are great.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everyone.
I got
The longer I work on this, the less I trust data science.
You know,
Like,
you should
look at
not.
this correlation. Oh, I see. It's completely bogus.
That's the problem with the data. You know, this is the whole thing. How can you do research unless you have good data? I think
I
that's the
agree.
biggest
I agree.
conclusion. Anyway, sorry we're late. Karthik was presenting this same work to my lab
Oh,
and
great.
getting feedback. So it was important to finish that. Yeah, I thought we should just. Do you need to have any more discussion on the heterogeneity, on the choice of variables you want to use in their model? Are you done with that?
No, I don't think we've ever discussed it. And so Raidul was presenting things that he's done. And
Oh,
I think
okay.
that's part of the heterogeneity, but it's been pulled out of the data that Kartik sent. Yeah?
Yeah.
You want to explain this a little bit?
Sure. So, Karthik, feel free to correct me along if I'm misunderstanding anything. So, Karthik provided us a heat map that is produced based on those correlation values extracted from all the variables included in the SS Fusion dataset. So, I basically extracted or sliced the variables that has significance or correlation beyond 0.01 and made a list. So in the x-axis, I would say I have different equipment types, like including the situation data, electric unit, room heater, central furnace. And on the right-hand side, I have included the variables based on the correlation matrix. What are some of the significant variables associated with installation of this different heating system in the household? My idea was that to have a discussion, okay, whether it is making sense or uh, how can we leverage this correlation matrix to include or infer some of the rules or the modeling approach, have more realistic representation of the heating system installation dynamics.
Oh, so what's the number you said of correlation cutoff you used?
I used 0.01.
0.1. Wow, that's pretty low. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you should have a higher tolerance, much higher threshold. You're being too inclusive at 0.01, in the sense that if you're trying to exclude variables based on having a high correlation, is that what you're trying to do?
Yes, like if I put the threshold as 0.05, there are so many significant variables.
Oh, you want to take the ones that are less.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was seeing wrong direction. Okay, fine. You're being okay. Now it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
So
super low correlation. You've only picked up those variables.
yeah. And the idea, like for example, as the correlation matrix says that use of fuel type of like solar energy or coal is associated with this type of specific installation of heating system. And that's fine. But Tammy's question was that how is it correlated? Like, does it make enough realistic representation? So that's kind of discussion maybe we can have to understand what are some of the variables we should think of including in the model.
So I have okay, wait, did you include negative correlations also?
Yes.
So then that could be one reason.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe a question first for the group. You've gone with equipment, Raydul, and I guess I was hoping to look at equipment plus fuel type, those clusters that I made.
Mhm.
So then you might get a different
Mm,
answer. But I wanted to have comment on those clusters first.
okay.
Nobody has provided any feedback on that. And
Okay.
so you'd probably get similar correlations, but what you've done here is you're still, rather than treating the equipment plus fuel type as a group, which I think we were trying to do, right?
Mhm.
They're still apart because Kartik has not clustered them yet. So I guess I did not get any responses on what I sent around. Curious if other people had thoughts on that and whether that's a reasonable thing to do is cluster those two things together and then do a clustering like this. Because Kartik, it's not that hard for you to redo the matrix, right? It's just a code.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the question is if we think those clusters are realistic or not. That's the first question. And the second question is if we have enough sampling for those clusters, which I can get to once we decide what those clusters are.
What do you mean if we have?
So we make certain clusters, and what if enough of those households don't exist for Rydell to run any model, for example? Like what if the error bars are too high?
Well, they exist because I took the data that you sent
Mhm.
that had the breakdown.
Right.
I did it for Colorado, attempting to cover 95%. So everything that was small got kind of thrown out.
Okay, yeah, then I think it should be fine.
Yeah, so what I did was I mean, go back to that email. Okay, so what Kartik had sent me was in each Puma, there was, I can't remember if it was equipment and then within that a split of fuels or
Correct.
the other way.
The other way, yeah.
And so then what I wanted to do was, I looked at the big lumps. And then, like I just started removing the biggest lumps and putting them into clusters, basically.
Mhm.
So, Tammy, my take on this is if given what I think you're trying to do with the model so far, which is mainly around operating cost and efficiency, the reason to lump together, so if you don't lump together, the benefit is that you can focus just, for example, on the fuel, and then you have fewer categories and more households in each category. If you cross them, you'll have more categories because you have gas forced air, gas boiler, oil forced air, oil boiler, electricity, etc. The question is the efficiency of a gas furnace different from a gas boiler? Because you have gas forced air as a gas furnace, whereas gas water distribution is a gas boiler. And I think that degree of granularity doesn't buy you too much. The reason you care about the distribution system is a separate point later in terms of the cost of switching to a heat pump. You want to know what
Yeah.
distribution system they have.
Yeah. So, but I think
So
that's important.
it's important, but you don't need to. You can have it as a separate category that you use for a different purpose. So
Well, why would you not? Okay, so two things. One is that in a forced air distribution system, you do have a different efficiency because you might have duct losses, which can be substantial.
I know, but you don't have that information to use it.
No, but there's the potential to have it. There's the potential to include that cost.
Yeah,
So-
okay. So
so-
if you want to refine your efficiency, then it is best to put them together. Yeah, for sure.
So I guess maybe I'm not sure what you're arguing, Narasimha, and maybe I'm arguing against something that you're not arguing. So maybe we should clarify what that is.
Yeah, I mean, the question is why are we considering this question of lumping together? Right? I mean, the Rex has it as separate categories. You could literally just drop one category and focus just on fuel. The advantage would be you'd have fewer categories to deal with and more households in each category, higher sample size. But
Yeah.
of course, you lose accuracy in terms of the efficiencies. So if you want more accuracy, it then, to me, makes sense to have a cross product for categories. There are more overall categories, and for a few of them, you'll have very few sample, observation. But that's fine. So my default view is, if you want to be accurate about efficiency, of course, group them as a cross product. So you have gas forced air distinct from gas boiler water distribution.
Well,
And
it is
that's-
both, efficiency and what you said, the fact that the pre-existing equipment matters. And so
Yeah,
right now we have a very large number of cross products. You know, the number might be like 25. My goal was to reduce that number.
exactly. Yeah.
Based on the data that Kartik already has. Right, so it's not, he already has electricity versus forced air. So then those would just be given like a new level, like number 1, if that makes sense.
1 second. You say you have 25 categories.
I
Do you
don't
mean
remember. I don't remember how many, but
you have
if
a
you,
lot?
if you look at where, so based on the data that Kartik provided, he gave me fractions of how many were in each
Yeah.
cross product.
Just of these two, of distribution system and fuel.
All of, yeah, just of those two, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And so I figured that was significant, those two things, because they affect both efficiency and prior equipment, which we believe might be important. And so, but I think that Raidul's original question was, do I have to represent all these very small categories that were, you know, it might be like some weird heating type, right? And my answer was, I don't think we should, because we don't have any information on transitions for those very small categories. Like
So
my proposal is that these are classifying in these ways are good enough.
in these ways in the email,
Yeah,
the 9 categories.
yeah. And maybe 10, and then I have a question about hydronic, but
The number 5, where you have electricity, gas, LPG, heat pump, that's just heat pump. I mean, there's almost no non-electric heat pumps that I know of. Right? Okay.
right,
Okay.
that's what,
That's just heat pump.
so they are
And-
reported that way in the data, though. If you
Yeah.
look at the data, the people will say they have a gas heat pump, but probably what they mean is they have an electric heat pump with gas backup.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's probably a misclassification in reporting that we shouldn't carry forward into the,
Yeah, it's too
Yeah.
complicated, I think that. So I understand all of these makes perfect sense. The 7, what's 7? Because the 8 is the baseboard. 7, what's the difference between? Oh, it's 7 and 8 is baseboard with gas, utility gas, or other kind of fuel.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think this makes sense to me. Yeah.
And
So,
the utility versus bottled gas is like delivered propane,
yeah,
which is a
propane,
huge
usually
cost
propane.
difference.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
huge
sure.
cost difference. So I
Sure.
think we want to track that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this makes sense. I think this is the right grouping. There's probably an other category. I don't know if you want to include wood plus other. People may have like this mobile little electric resistive heat unit Some households have that.
So those would be actually number 6, portable electric heater.
Okay, that's also electric based
Yes,
code.
it's like anything that does not have the number 6 and number 6 through 8 are like anything that don't require ducting, and I hesitate like whether they're built into the wall or not.
Yeah,
It-
I would call it resistive heat, electric resistive heat, because they are all resistive heat.
Yeah. Mhm.
It doesn't matter if it's mobile or a baseboard, it's because it has a certain efficiency and cost. That's
Right,
important.
and infrastructure in the building.
Yeah. And I would call 7 and 8, I would put the word boiler in there, because
Well,
you're
those are
boiling.
boilers.
Yeah, because they're boiling water and distributing water.
No, so okay, 7 and 8 are individual devices. They don't have a distribution system. The water
Oh.
I addressed down in the bottom, the hydronic systems.
Oh, that's what you, okay.
Yeah, we don't, so Colorado doesn't have a lot of them. And so it's like 4%. So we can have another category. But 6 through 8 are just these distributed throughout the house. You can replace them as individual units, not as a whole system.
With gas, you have heaters like that portable things?
Yeah. Come stay in our ski villages.
Huh.
So many. So
So is it a large part of your sample, more than the hydronic?
It's yeah, I think so. I couldn't tell you, I couldn't remember how much, but I can tell you later. Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know if it's more than hydronic, but so again, what I was trying to do was get a representation of greater than 95%. And so I just kept adding ones that would, groups that would, like the next biggest group.
So why does it say portable electric heater in 7 and 8?
There is. Oh, I don't know.
Okay. That shouldn't be there. Okay.
No, it shouldn't be there, but if it got reported, then we'll just, it's not electric, but if it got reported as utility gas portable electric heater, we'll just throw it in there. Like, I think there's probably a fair amount of, I mean, not a huge amount, but a few percentage points misreporting because of people's lack of understanding of their own systems.
I'm just wondering, we should lump them together as an other 7 and 8 and 9.
I guess so the other thing was trying to be inclusive. So I felt like, so example for 7, I listed a bunch of things, some of which are very small fractions. Right. But if it would be easy enough to lump them all together, which I think it is, so the reason these ways of saying it are here is because those are that's exactly the text in Kartik's levels.
Yeah, it's straight from the survey.
Yeah. Yeah, so it would be easy enough to add them all up, even if they're very small.
I would put 7, 8, and 9 in other. It's going to be a small category. You don't have enough information to really qualify differences between them.
I don't think they're small categories.
7, 8, and 9. But if they're putting electric heater in there, it sounds like it's okay. Well,
I can tell you how much they are if it helps you. I somewhere have I can't remember if I saved the total fractions that they were, but I can share that information. It's just a summary of Kartik's data. So I did this for Colorado, trying to make 95%. And then I went and I looked at the national that Kartik had sent the whole nation. And compared the percentages, like, is there anything super weird about Colorado? And the only thing that's weird is that weird or different than the national is we don't have a lot of oil. And I think we have less hydronic than the national, well, it's about the same as the national average. So I'm happy to share the percentages so you can see.
I mean, it's okay. It's you can make a judgment yourself. So there's no oil here. Interesting, because Colorado hardly has any oil.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
It's
So
like you
you
have,
think you can distinguish the 7, 8 efficiencies from the 1, 2 efficiencies?
yeah. I mean, I think we have substantially different numbers because both because of can we just, yeah, I think we can.
I mean, you have data to inform them.
Yeah,
Efficiencies,
it's probably not great.
Okay. Well, I think moot point. I think these categories are fine. If you decide to lump or not 7, 8, 7 and 8, it's not a big deal. So I would say that's great. It's fine to me.
Does anyone else have thoughts on this?
So tell me, how would, I guess, Raidul, for you, I guess, how would you be using this, given you have the correlations, would you like me to do like more slicing along, correlations that, that you've seen in the data, or what would be the next step from here?
Well, so I would suggest the next step is to produce these clusters, like a new variable with levels, and then rerun the correlation matrix, and then Raidul will do exactly what he did with
Mhm.
showing what correlates, right? But I think right now he's got some correlations between fuel and equipment that we don't need if we just go with these clusterings, right?
So with the further clusters that Raidul was just showing, so do we want to create those, or do we want to create these first, and then, as you said, run the correlation matrix and then refine that further, or?
That's what I was suggesting, is that we create these,
Okay.
rerun the correlation matrix, same code,
Mhm.
have Raidul take a look at that, because
Okay.
he's already gone through that procedure.
Mhm.
And maybe, Raidul, I don't know if you ran into any questions that you would post to Kartik, like while you were doing that.
No, I think it's fine. Yeah, for now.
Okay.
So I think another question I have that I'd like to hear from everybody is, Kartik, you have these variables that are like built 2009, built 2010.
Mhm.
And those come out a little bit funny in the correlations.
Mhm.
I'm curious how people would propose to do that. Yeah, is this the best way to do it, or I know it's been working for you, Kartik, but I'm just curious because I feel like this is a level of granularity that we don't have in other areas of the data.
Mhm. I mean, you could do a decade-wise or something to, just merge all of them.
Rex 2020 has every year specified for year build.
AHS maybe I forget it. Which,
HS doesn't have every year, I don't think. Or maybe it does.
it's actually ACS.
Yes, yes.
Has the urban, yeah.
So Kartik, you've been doing a lot of work on the correlations and including the well-being, and I'm curious how this variable plays in.
No, I've not looked at this one particularly. I've not looked at the year built. Yeah, actually, I could just make it decade-wise, and maybe that'll give us a little more, more data points in each category. We have to lump it decade-wise.
Yeah, or maybe 5 years. I don't know. I
for
think
5 years.
code started changing a lot faster, but I don't know.
Well, you cannot do 5 years because I think the ones below 2000 are all decade wise. There's just more granularity after 2005.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could just make it decade wise to see if one of the funny things don't show up.
So here I think the ResTalk may be useful because ResTalk has information on the year built
Mhm.
and on the R values.
Yep.
The main reason to know the year built is whether they've got better insulation. And I remember for New York data, using ResTalk data, there was not a very good correlation between R values and year built, and even on decadal basis. There's just too much variation because who knows when things were remodeled or not. But if
Yeah.
Zara were to look at the data set for ResTalk and see if you can find a strong correlation between the year built and the R value, that's a good empirical basis for differentiating.
Yeah, Sarah, what do you think about that? Like, how would you, based on your experience with ResTalk, how would you lump homes?
I don't have any comment for now because I didn't check any correlation in the rest like between the variable we use for our building model. But I definitely check that and see what it comes up.
Well, you could look at Fort Collins right now, right?
Yes, we have Fort Collins, but I didn't check the correlation between R values and the vintage year.
And I think, Narasimha, so you're saying that you didn't see any?
In New York State, we didn't see a correlation because, people, like I said, it's just so much variation, and especially if something is really old, people have remodeled it for sure, or they change their equipment. I don't know. Yeah, so you should expect one. I was very surprised, but I think you should just look at the synthetic data set for ResTalk now, nationwide, just to be clear.
But
And
so ResTalk is making assumptions, right? They're not actual buildings.
well, not making assumptions, they're deriving a synthetic data set from real data. So that synthetic data set is supposed to keep some of those relationships.
Yeah, so that's
I
what
don't know
I'm,
if it preserves all of them.
well, I
Yeah.
think that's what I would wonder is my guess is the asynthetic building in ResTalk has a recollection of whether it's been remodeled.
Okay. Well,
Like-
so yeah.
Like the R values, I think are simulated based on the code the building was built to and then its remodel status. Is that right, Zara?
I believe so, yes.
So then it's not just vintage that you need to know if it's remodeled as well.
But that should be in it, right? Like, I think it
So
would
that-
take a probabilistic, like, here's what it was built to, and then here's the probability of it having been remodeled.
Okay, but then why would you want the vintage then directly in your model?
So what we're doing is we're taking oh, you're saying it doesn't correlate with the R values at all. Let's take a look, Zara. We're taking the vintage and the size, and then we're taking a range of heat loss per square foot for that vintage and size and location.
Yes.
And we're saying this is what ResTalk would predict.
I mean, if you do a regression of the ResTalk synthetic data set, where you're predicting the R value with the vintage, remodel, and some other variables, and see what you get. What are the most important predictors of the R value? Because you're trying to get at and use the grouping variables you have. like equipment type,
Mm-hmm.
maybe floor size of the house. Because what you ideally would like is that your categories of groupings for houses actually correlate to our values. Then you don't need to
Yeah.
get a whole bunch more categories. So I would do that regression and see
Yeah, and
what
it's not as simple as R value, I think. So I think heat loss is a better indicator because the R of different components is different.
Yeah, right. I meant, yeah, overall, if you have an overall heat loss, like a U value for the house,
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of net U or average U or something.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm talking, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's take a look at that, Zara. I have some ideas about how that could be set up. Okay, so do we have a way forward? Does everyone understand what it is? And is everyone comfortable with it?
Silence is a yes from Zara, Rizal, and Karthik.
Kartik, do you know what you're doing?
Yes, and then we just rerun the thing with new clusters, and then Rider's going to take a look at it, and then we'll just make more clusters or not, depending on what we see after that. So
And then Zara's gonna check the res stock output to see if the groupings we're proposing based on age are sensible. In the meantime, Kartik's gonna group houses decadally.
mhm.
And then Kartik can do Raidul can do the correlation. But Zara and I may come back with something else like, yeah, the age totally doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I think another, I guess, question or thing for Rider to keep in mind is like, Rider, when you see these go through the correlation map thing, if you think, I could group them differently, or for example, for income, I just have, low, medium, high. If you think, making more categories makes sense. So I had to make some choices, right? So if you don't agree or you have a better suggestion for those choices, just let me know as well.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so in the remaining time, anybody have any topic of discussion?
I want to send something to you, Narasimha, but it's not really a modeling discussion, but it's around the convergence things, because I have some ideas too. So I think if we try to converge hours before the in-person meeting and the agenda setting, then it'll be beneficial.
Sounds good. I just wanted to bring up what I'm thinking about a little bit. I'm trying to think of, as I mentioned, what do we want to show in terms of integration in our modeling work at the level of data, methods, and ideas. Data, methods that are enabled by this integration and the new questions we can ask that couldn't have been asked before. And so starting at the data level, I've been trying to create a slide, but it's too messy to show. But the idea is, we have previous data on Fusion, which is showing us cumulative stresses in US households. And then we have well-being. And with this project, we have merged those. So now we have cumulative stressors and socio-demographic conditions and people's self-assessed well-being. And then we brought those down into Colorado at the county level. And I've spoken to Ryan. I was trying to think about what data he would have bottom up that may be useful for us to maybe validate our results for Colorado using Fusion ACS. And the one variable we came up with was floor space. So I was thinking, we have floor space estimates, and he has floor space estimates.
Mm-hmm.
So by whether we can aggregate up to a common level of spatial granularity, I was hoping we could use data from him. So I would show that where the integration is data from disparate sources to link subjective well-being, objective well-being, downscale it, and validate it using bottom-up data. That to me is a vision of integration of many kinds, of different kinds of information from different surveys to characterize households' well-being, bringing it down to a spatial level that's practicable for our analysis and perhaps validating it from bottom-up data. So that would be my example of our data vision of deep integration. I have to still get data from Ryan and see if that's possible. Maybe equipment type is another one he mentioned, could be, because we also had to kind of impute equipment type, right?
Yeah.
To the county level. And maybe we can verify that. He wasn't so sure. So that's my vision of the data module. I can't think of what else.
But this one,
Yeah. Well, but that's, to me, that's then data feeding into methods,
okay.
right? Because that's now we're using this data and we're clustering households based on these data to best represent different types of decision making. So that would be the feeding in of the data into the methods. That's what I was thinking. That's how far I've gone.
Interested in the space idea, because I don't know what you're thinking, so maybe we can hear more about that later.
Okay. There's not much more to it than that on the data side, but I'll try and build it up into the models and send it around before the in-person meeting to see if it's useful.
So can I just say a couple of things that I've been thinking in response to your response about ideas
Yeah.
email? So I sent Narasimha a message about like, what is this ideas thing? What do you mean? Because ideas is very broad.
Yeah.
So there's two things that I have in reaction to what you've been saying. One is that you've mentioned this sort of modelers versus social scientists. And that was a division that we had at first, but I feel like it's richer now. And so when we go back to saying there's a divide between modelers and social scientists, I feel like it's a little backward step. What we are doing is triangulating with different methods. Some of them come from people who are doing social sciences and some are from data people. But I also feel like we have divisions among the modeling team in terms of statistics, longitudinal, and kind of mechanistic. And so I feel like there's more aspects to the triangulation than.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to bring that forward. The other around ideas is what we're triangulating on. And so going back to our boundary objects, which were heterogeneity, paradigm of change, and
well-being.
I think we represent in all of those, but a thing that I've been poking into is this notion of realist evaluation and how it relates to what we're doing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's more the ideas have been brought forward more in terms of evaluation of interventions. I feel like it's very relevant to what we're doing because the question they ask is not like what works, but what works for whom, under what circumstances, and how and why. And I feel like that's something we've been trying to get at. And so they have three elements that I think are very analogous to our own boundary objects. One of them is context, one is mechanism, and one is outcome. And I feel like those align really well, right? The context is the heterogeneity, or how do you divide and cluster into identifying context, like we were just doing with the houses, right? Like, oh, the distribution system is a context that makes a difference. And then there's the mechanism, which is obvious, and the outcome, I think, is very aligned with the well-being. We're acknowledging different forms of well-being. So those are, I don't have those ideas well formed, but when you say ideas, I feel like there are questions in each of those buckets that we can now ask by triangulating.
So yeah, I mean, generally, I totally support your thinking and where you're going with it. The two things that I'm struggling over is what you mean by triangulation. I mean, I do think we're trying to bridge between them. I usually think of triangulation in the sense of trying to validate some hypothesis or some data from various sources. But I think maybe we have to just think about what we mean by that. This realist evaluation thing sounds like it's very useful. I'm wondering how we'll apply it in the context of not having an actual intervention, but creating a model of a hypothetical intervention, I guess. Heat pump adoption is the intervention, I guess.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think
it can apply.
it's it's a lot in the health space. It is things are.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
directly. It's not like you can translate the principles exactly. And
Yeah.
I hesitate to use some of the words because they're some of these like deeply embedded in social science that I would probably take in vain if I start using the words right. And somebody will be angry.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
that said, what I'm thinking of what we're doing as realist projection.
Yeah. Sure. Just to clarify, because you were asking about the breadth of the concept of ideas, I was very specifically thinking about being able to ask questions that previously one couldn't ask.
Yeah.
So, for example, and I just want to identify a few of those questions. Like for example, how does your cumulative stresses affect your own life satisfaction? Or how do people in one household group that you're developing view heat pump adoption differently from another group, which previously models wouldn't be able to ask because they just had one residential sector. Now, I'm not clear in my mind where to put ABMs because we had ABMs before. Are we trying to improve on past ABMs? If so, how? Are we just setting ourselves up to create a better version of what was done before, in which case it's not necessarily an integration of any sorts. It's just a research contribution. So my question is, are ABMs something that fall into our deep integration, or is it just a separate research output, a research contribution that's building on the past? I haven't been able to see how we put ABM into our integration. Is it something we want to showcase or not? So that's something, Raidul, for you to think about and talk about later, maybe in the in-person meeting, something like that.
You have a comment on that, Raidul?
Yeah, so the way I see this integration or taking advantage of what this research project is offering, bringing those heterogeneous household distribution, decision dynamics, and the granularity this dataset is able to address so many fundamental questions that we are trying to envision in our ABM model. Like initially the ABM model, like Narasimha has presented in the Friday meeting, is kind of like, okay, there are different types of modeling approaches. Some are mostly focused on market share approaches. Some are mostly focused on behavioral assumption. But the ABM we are trying to envision is kind of making a bridge between that, how behavioral assumption would affect the decision-making process, besides some hard barrier like monetary value. That wouldn't have been possible without participation from different domain experts like social scientists or energy domain. To me, that's kind of like a unique angle we are trying to address.
So I see that similar to you, Raidul, I also see that I don't see the ABM as itself as novel. Sure, people have done ABMs before. But the question is, once you have done integration of the ideas, how do you visualize them? So I see ABM as almost a visualization tool. Sure, visualization itself was not novel, and yet it assists in demonstrating what you have done and what the ABM is not the contribution, but the ABM can represent the contribution. Because we can say, yeah, we think these things matter to different people, and then the question is, so what? What does it matter out in the world, right? Like, how does that change how many people will transition? So I guess
Yeah.
it's a tool to showcase the integration.
Okay, so that's how you're seeing it. That's one way to think about it. I think Raidul was hinting at that we're doing we're using the agent-based model in a more advanced way than before by including multiple groups. I think you're hinting at that, Raidul. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
And if so, which? And not to answer now. The thing is, in our vision, either what you're doing now or in your vision for the next 2 years, what do we foresee as being how you will use the ABM in a more advanced way? So you will have different decision rule for each of the groups. Is that what we're heading towards? Because right now, that's not what they do. Past ABMs will take some theory about, okay, peer effect and psychological effect, and they'll apply that to all households. It's the same, right? So if we are differentiating household behavior with similar ideas, but differentiating them, so psychological aspect is greater with, gas furnace owners versus others, So that's the question to ask. If you're going to hypothesize that, then that's great. Then we should integrate that and put that into the deep integration. So just think about that and keep it in mind as to what you would want to say about that. Where are we heading? Or another direction could be we are validating, unlike previously. So we are going to use the Fusion ACS data and ResTalk data to set up an ABM. We'll project and visualize, and then we will take the results and we'll validate it against some data set that I don't know exists on house heat pump adoption in the last 2 years that we're going to buy from some company. For example, that could also be an advance.
Yeah, it was my personal kind of vision, the first idea that you pitched. Currently, in the first paper, we are trying to do is we are mostly laying the foundation of some of the behavioral assumptions and also the market share penetration. But along the way, I'm pretty sure that I'm not taking the 100% advantage of all the data set that Karthik and you are producing. But along the way, we'd be able to develop rules for different bucket so as to produce a more realistic representation. But for the time being, I think, and Tammy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So we are just laying down the first idea, what we are trying to do, but in next 2 or 3 years, taking advantage of all the assimilation of all the data set, we'll be able to come up with more granular rule-based formulation.
Just one more thing. I like the idea you had about this cost buffer for different groups. That to me is novel.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? If that came from some literature, let's bring that in because that's a linkage that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
I really like that. I think it's realistic. And that can be for a single household group.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I'll think more deeply.
Okay, Tammy, you had to go, right?
I do. Yeah, is it all right? Do you feel like you've
Yeah,
done
yeah,
everything
I
that-
think we're done. I think we're done.
Thanks for sending around the agenda, and thanks everybody for. I feel like we're triangulating. Narzima might not define it that way, but I feel like we're approaching the data from different ways, and that to me feels like a
Yeah, no, I think we're converging, triangulating, we're coming to a good place in terms of identifying what we're doing. So, yeah, sounds good. Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.